The rain poured down in thick sheets, drumming against the roof of the old patrol car. Inside, Officer Daniel Hayes sat frozen, his hands trembling over the steering wheel. In the back seat, Emma Carter's body slumped, her lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling. Daniel had done it. He had killed her. His mind screamed in chaos, but his voice could only whisper to himself, "It was the only way. No one can find out." Outside, the storm masked the small sounds of struggle and guilt. Daniel's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. The office where they worked together, the one he had walked into just hours ago with a smile, suddenly felt like a cage of secrets. How could everything have spiraled this fast? And now, with the rain washing the streets clean, Daniel realized one horrifying truth. Someone could see him. Someone could know. But who? And when? He glanced at the dashboard clock. It read 11:47 p.m., the time when his life had completely changed. He needed a plan. He needed to cover it up. But even as he fumbled with the radio, a loud knock echoed against the patrol car window. Daniel froze, the blood in his veins turning ice cold. He didn't move, didn't breathe. Whoever it was, friend or foe, could see everything. And in that moment, Daniel realized that no matter what he did next, nothing would ever be the same again. Days earlier, life had seemed ordinary. Daniel Hayes was a respected state trooper in a quiet town in Vermont. Known for his sharp instincts and steady calm, he had built a reputation for protecting the community and earning the trust of his colleagues. Emma Carter, his co-worker, had joined the force 2 years ago. She was energetic, brilliant at her work, and had a way of bringing warmth to even the coldest police station mornings. Daniel remembered the first day he met her. She had tripped over a box of evidence folders while laughing at herself. "Grace under pressure," he had joked, offering his hand to help her up. From that small, awkward moment, an unexpected friendship blossomed. They shared coffee breaks, patrol shifts, and stories about their childhoods. Emma, from a small town in New Hampshire, and Daniel, from Burlington, Vermont. Their friendship gradually turned into something deeper, though neither admitted it at first. In quiet moments at the station, their hands would brush, eyes would linger, and unspoken words floated between them. But Daniel, married with a teenage daughter, knew the line they were crossing. Emma, sensing the danger but caught in the warmth of connection, found herself unable to pull away. Weeks of stolen moments built tension. Daniel's mind wrestled between loyalty to his family and desire for Emma. Each encounter was electric, but the fear of exposure grew heavier. The office, once a place of order and safety, became a cage where every glance could betray them. Then came the night everything changed. It started like any other shift. The storm outside had been predicted, but the warnings didn't seem serious at first. Daniel and Emma were assigned to a routine check on a suspicious vehicle near the outskirts of town. Traffic was light, the roads slick with rain, and the radio chatter was minimal. They joked about the storm, about getting wet, about their favorite coffees. Daniel laughed more freely than he had in months, feeling a sense of relief he knew was fleeting. The conversation shifted, as it always did when they were alone. They talked about regrets, dreams, the weight of responsibility. Emma confided about her loneliness, the pressure to prove herself. Daniel shared stories about his daughter, his wife, and the guilt of living a double life in his heart. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside him, a mixture of passion, fear, and desperation. And then, it happened. Emma mentioned a conversation she had with another officer about their closeness. "They are starting to notice, Danny," she said softly, gripping the steering wheel. "They might figure it out." Her eyes were wide, almost pleading, and something in her tone made Daniel panic. The fear of losing everything, his family, his job, his reputation, surged like lightning through him. In a fraction of a second, a thought darker than anything he had ever imagined took root. The struggle was brief, chaotic. Words failed them both. Hands moved too fast. The storm outside seemed to scream along with the conflict inside the car. And before either of them fully understood what had happened, Daniel's world collapsed into a silence more deafening than any thunderclap. Emma lay still. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. The rain beat against the windshield, a rhythm that mocked his heartbeat. Daniel's mind raced, calculating, panicking. He knew the next moments would define him forever. Could he cover this up? Could anyone know what had truly happened? And then, as he tried to steady his shaking hands and think clearly, the patrol car's lights flickered, not from the storm, but from the shadowy figure approaching the vehicle. Someone was coming. Someone could see him. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The knock on the window came again, louder, urgent. His mind screamed to hide, to run, but the door was locked. Whoever it was, they were close enough to see the fear in his eyes. And in that terrifying, frozen moment, Daniel realized that the storm outside wasn't the only danger. It was only the beginning of a storm inside, one that could swallow him whole. That night marked a turning point. A line had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. And though the quiet town continued to sleep through the storm, Daniel knew that every light, every shadow, every whisper of wind could carry the consequences of what he had done. The guilt, the fear, the secret. They were alive now, and nothing would ever erase them. And just as Daniel considered his next move, the shadow at the window shifted. He could hear the scrape of shoes against wet pavement. A voice called out from the darkness. Daniel's hand froze over the door handle. The words were faint, barely audible, but they cut through the rain like a knife. "Daniel, I know what happened." The rain poured harder. The wind whipped against the car. And in that moment, the cliffhanger hung heavy in the air. Someone knew. Perfect. Let's continue chapter 1 going back to build the story, showing the earlier events leading up to the shocking moment, emphasizing kindness, empathy, and suspense. I'll make sure to end this continuation with another extreme event to keep the tension high. Daniel couldn't sleep that night, though the rain had finally slowed. His mind replayed every conversation, every smile, every stolen glance with Emma. He remembered the first time she had noticed the little things about him, how she had remembered his daughter's favorite comic book series and asked about it one Monday morning, or how she had brought him a coffee just the way he liked it without being asked. Small acts, simple gestures, but they had built a connection deeper than Daniel had ever expected. At work, life carried on like nothing had changed. They responded to traffic accidents, helped stranded motorists, and investigated minor thefts in the sleepy town. During these routine calls, Emma would laugh at Daniel's corny jokes, and Daniel would admire her calm under pressure. She had a way of seeing the best in everyone, of noticing when someone was struggling but pretending to be fine, and then quietly offering help. Daniel often wondered how she stayed so kind when the world could be so harsh. One afternoon, they responded to a call about a missing dog. The owner, a frazzled elderly woman, was crying near her front porch. Emma gently spoke to her, comforting her while Daniel searched the yard. They found the little dog hiding under a bush, shivering and scared. When Emma handed the dog to its owner, her smile was soft, but Daniel noticed her eyes glisten with empathy. That moment, so ordinary, so small, reminded Daniel why he admired her. She cared, genuinely, without expecting anything in return. Days passed, each blending into the next. The tension between Daniel and Emma grew quietly, hidden beneath professionalism. They were careful, but subtle hints of affection lingered. A hand lingering a little too long on the shoulder, a glance that spoke volumes in a crowded room, a joke that seemed meant for only the two of them. Then came the early winter snowstorm. Roads were slippery, visibility low, and the station was busier than usual. Daniel and Emma were assigned together on a night patrol. The city streets were almost empty, the only sound the crunch of tires against snow. They talked about their childhoods, about mistakes they had made and lessons learned, about hopes for the future. Daniel found himself opening up more than he ever had to anyone, about his fears, his regrets, the guilt he carried about not always being there for his daughter. Emma listened with that same unwavering empathy that had drawn him to her. She didn't judge. She didn't offer hollow advice. She simply listened, nodded, and offered comfort in the quietest of ways. "We all have our battles, Danny," she said softly, "but it doesn't mean we can't be better tomorrow." Those words echoed in Daniel's mind long after the storm passed. But even as they shared moments of connection, Daniel felt the shadow of fear growing. He was crossing boundaries, risking everything he had worked for. He tried to remind himself of his family, of his responsibilities. And yet, every time he saw Emma, Every time she smiled at him or shared a small act of kindness, he felt pulled further into a dangerous orbit. The tension reached its peak the night of the patrol car incident. They had responded to a call about a suspicious van parked near the highway. At first, it seemed routine, but the storm outside and the isolation of the road amplified every fear and doubt in Daniel's mind. They parked near the van, the rain mixing with sleet, creating a cold, harsh wind. Emma, ever observant, noticed Daniel's distracted expression. "Hey, talk to me," she said gently, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. "You're tense. Something's bothering you." Daniel tried to laugh it off, but the sound caught in his throat. He realized how much he relied on Emma's presence, how much he feared losing the bond they had built, even as he knew it was dangerous. The closer he felt to her, the more panicked he became at the thought of anyone discovering their secret. The conversation grew tense, and emotions ran high. Emma, sensing his inner turmoil, pressed him about honesty and transparency. "You can't keep running from the truth," she said, her voice steady but firm. Daniel felt the walls closing in. In a sudden moment of panic, a thought darker than anything he had ever considered surged in his mind. Before either of them could fully react, a sudden movement startled Daniel. The van's sliding door flung open from a gust of wind, and a shadowy figure emerged, slipping on the icy ground. Daniel reached out instinctively, trying to protect Emma, but the chaos was too fast. The van rocked violently, the headlights flickered, and the storm outside seemed to howl louder than ever. Emma stumbled backward, tripping over the slick road edge. Daniel lunged to catch her, but something went terribly wrong. A loud crack echoed through the empty highway, the sound of life breaking, of a moment spiraling beyond control. Daniel froze, his heart hammering as Emma lay on the icy ground. The storm raged on, washing away the world around them, but not the horror of what had just happened. He could barely breathe, barely think. Every instinct screamed at him to help, to save her, but he knew deep down that nothing would be the same again. And just as he reached for his radio to call for help, the van door slammed shut with a deafening thud, trapping him, trapping her, trapping the moment in an unbearable suspense. A gust of wind blew across the highway, carrying with it a shadow that wasn't from the storm. Someone had arrived, and Daniel realized with terror that he wasn't alone. The snowstorm had not relented. The wind sliced through the trees like cold knives, shaking the branches against the dark highway. Daniel Hayes crouched behind the van, his uniform wet and clinging to his body, his hands trembling as he tried to steady his breathing. Emma Carter lay a few feet away, unconscious but breathing, her face pale in the dim glow of the van's taillights. The reality of the situation pressed down on him like a weight that refused to lift. For a moment, Daniel considered calling it in, but the thought of anyone discovering what had happened, their secret, their forbidden connection, filled him with a terror that paralyzed him. His mind raced, calculating the next step, thinking about his family at home, about the consequences of being caught. If anyone knew, everything would unravel. His daughter would be devastated. His wife would never forgive him. His career, gone. All of it could disappear in a single moment of exposure. He glanced around. The road stretched empty in both directions, except for the van that had become the center of chaos. Its sliding door was still slightly ajar, creaking in the wind. Daniel's eyes flicked to the shadows beyond the headlights, but he could see nothing. The storm masked everything. He whispered Emma's name, his voice breaking. "Emma, wake up. Please, wake up." Her eyelids fluttered. A weak cough escaped her lips, and she groaned. Relief flooded Daniel, but it was short-lived. He knew she was hurt, even if the injuries were not immediately visible. He crawled over to her, checking her for cuts, bruises, or broken bones. Her arm was twisted awkwardly, her legs scraped by the icy asphalt. Daniel's hands shook as he tried to adjust her position without causing more pain. We have to get somewhere safe," he said, his voice barely audible over the storm. "You're going to be okay. Just hold on." The next few minutes felt endless. Daniel managed to lift Emma into the patrol car, careful not to jostle her too much. The heater worked only weakly, and the windshield wiper struggled against the snow and sleet. He wrapped a blanket around her, borrowed from the back of the car, and sat beside her, holding her hand as tightly as he could. The weight of what had just happened pressed on him, Not just the fear of being caught, but the realization of the harm he had caused. Hours seemed to pass as the storm raged outside. Daniel drove slowly, carefully, every creaking branch and snapping twig outside making him flinch. He felt trapped between two worlds, the outside world, cold and violent, and the storm inside himself, guilt and panic intertwined. He wanted to believe he could fix it, that somehow everything could return to the way it had been. But deep down, he knew the line had been crossed, irreversibly. Emma eventually stirred fully awake, her eyes blinking against the dim light. She looked around, confused and frightened. "Daniel, what happened?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He forced a calm he didn't feel. "It's okay. You're safe now. Just stay still." She nodded weakly, trusting him despite the obvious pain and fear in the air. Daniel thought about all the moments that had led them here, the laughter in the break room, the late-night coffee runs, the shared confessions of past mistakes and dreams. He remembered the kindness she had shown him countless times, how she had comforted a grieving victim, how she had helped a lost child find his way home, how she had never judged him even when he felt unworthy of trust. In that moment, Daniel realized that those small acts of kindness were part of what made him panic so completely. Emma's integrity, her unwavering honesty, and her gentle empathy had created a mirror in which Daniel could see himself, his failures, his weaknesses, and the darkness he tried to hide. And now, that darkness had manifested in a way he could never undo. By the time dawn broke, the storm had subsided to a drizzle, leaving the town in a wet, quiet aftermath. Daniel pulled the car into a secluded area near the edge of town, away from main roads, away from prying eyes. He helped Emma out carefully, supporting her weight. They moved slowly, each step cautious. Once inside a small abandoned warehouse Daniel knew about from previous patrols, he helped her settle onto an old cot. She was shivering, and he wrapped another blanket around her shoulders. He sat beside her, feeling the weight of responsibility heavier than any storm he had faced. "I'm sorry," Daniel said finally, the words tasting bitter. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. None of it." Emma's gaze softened, even through the pain. We have to deal with it," she whispered. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. But Danny, you have to promise me something. No more lies. No more hiding." Daniel nodded, though his stomach churned with dread. "I promise." They sat in silence for hours, the tension between them thick but muted. Daniel reflected on the lessons hidden in the chaos, the importance of kindness, the way empathy could bind people together even in the darkest times, and how easily trust could be shattered. He thought about his daughter, about his family, about the person he wanted to be, and the person he had become. But just as he allowed himself a sliver of hope that maybe, somehow, they could survive this together, a sudden noise shattered the fragile calm. A loud crash echoed through the warehouse. Boxes toppled over, and the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoed in the large, empty space. Daniel froze, his heart leaping into his throat. "Who's there?" he called, his voice shaky. No answer. Then came a second crash, closer this time. Something metallic hit the floor near the cot where Emma rested. She gasped, clutching the blanket tighter around her. Daniel's instincts took over. He moved to shield her, scanning the shadows for any sign of the intruder. And then he saw it, a figure moving quickly in the darkness, too fast, too silent. Daniel's pulse raced as he realized they were not alone. Someone had followed them, someone knew about the warehouse, someone had found them. He lunged forward, trying to intercept the figure, but the intruder was gone before he could reach them. All that remained was the sound of a door slamming somewhere deep in the warehouse, leaving Daniel and Emma in darkness, alone but not really alone. The storm outside had ended, but another storm had begun, one that promised to bring more danger, more exposure, and more consequences than they could imagine. Daniel's mind raced. Who had followed them? Were they being watched the entire time? Had someone seen the patrol car during the storm? And, most terrifying of all, did this person know what had really happened that night? As he helped Emma back to the cot, he realized that there was no turning back. The events of the past hours, the choices he had made, and the secrets he had tried to protect had led them to a tipping point. And now, more than ever, Daniel understood the fragile line between survival and disaster. The warehouse air felt heavy, almost suffocating, as Daniel's eyes adjusted to the darkness. The shadowy figure had paused just inside the doorway, silhouetted against the faint morning light sneaking through the high windows. In their hands, a long metallic object caught the light in a flash. It could be a pipe, a crowbar, maybe even a weapon. Daniel's breath hitched, his mind spinning through every possible scenario. Emma stood behind him, groaning softly. Daniel moved instinctively to shield her, placing his body between her and the intruder. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest, each beat echoing the fear that had been building since the storm. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to protect, but he knew one wrong move could escalate the situation beyond control. "Who's there?" Daniel called out, trying to keep his voice steady, though it trembled slightly. "Show yourself." The figure didn't respond. Instead, they took a slow step forward, the metallic object glinting again. Daniel could feel every nerve in his body tense, every muscle ready to spring. He glanced at Emma, who was clutching the blanket tighter, her eyes wide with fear but also filled with trust in him. He realized, with a pang of guilt, that everything that had led them here, the secret, the hidden emotions, the fear of exposure, had created this nightmare. The figure paused near a stack of crates and crouched down, pulling something from the shadows. Daniel's mind raced. Was it a weapon? A camera? Evidence? Whoever it was, they weren't just passing through. They had a purpose, and that purpose might destroy them. Daniel took a cautious step forward, trying to assert some control. "Listen," he said, his voice firmer now. "We don't want trouble. Just go. Leave us alone." The figure froze, then slowly turned, and for a fraction of a second, Daniel thought he recognized the shape, the stance, the way they carried themselves. But the dim light and the storm-soaked shadows kept the identity hidden. Daniel's pulse quickened. Whoever this was, they had followed them here, and they knew too much. Emma whispered, "Danny, maybe we should just—" "No," Daniel interrupted softly but firmly. "We can't just let them take control. We can't." He scanned the warehouse, looking for anything that could give him an advantage. Old crates, rusted shelving, an abandoned pallet, anything. His gaze fell on a small stack of wooden boxes near the back wall. He gestured subtly to Emma to stay down while he edged closer, keeping his eyes on the figure. Every step felt like walking on ice, each movement calculated and tense. The intruder suddenly lunged toward one of the crates near Daniel, and the metallic object glinted again. Daniel reacted on instinct, pushing Emma behind him and swinging one of the loose wooden planks like a bat. The figure staggered back, cursing under their breath. Daniel realized that whoever this was, they were prepared, and they weren't afraid to fight. The next few minutes blurred. Daniel and the figure exchanged a flurry of movement, each trying to gain control. Emma stayed low, clutching the blanket, trying to remain invisible. The warehouse echoed with the sounds of struggle, metal striking wood, feet sliding on the wet floor, the occasional muffled shout. Daniel felt his adrenaline spike, the fear mixing with a strange clarity, the kind that comes when survival is at stake. Finally, the intruder tripped over a loose pallet and fell hard onto the floor. Daniel seized the moment, pressing his advantage, but before he could fully restrain them, the figure's arms shot up, swinging the metallic object wildly. Daniel ducked just in time, the object grazing his shoulder and sending a jolt of pain through his body. Emma cried out, and Daniel froze for a second, realizing that the figure had almost struck her. His heart pounded in terror, and he knew that one misstep could cost them everything. The intruder scrambled to their feet and bolted toward the door. Daniel's instinct screamed at him to chase, but he glanced at Emma, who was trembling but still conscious. He couldn't risk leaving her alone, not now. Instead, he backed toward her, keeping his eyes on the doorway, ready for whatever came next. The figure had vanished into the morning mist outside the warehouse, leaving Daniel and Emma alone in the eerie quiet that followed. For a long moment, they just sat in silence, both of them soaked in sweat and fear, their breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. Daniel's mind raced with questions. Who had followed them? How much did they know? Were they being targeted, or was this a random act of danger that had chosen the wrong place at the wrong time? Emma finally broke the silence. "Danny, we have to be careful. Whoever that was, they are not going to stop. And I think I think they know about us. Daniel swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. Then we need a plan. We can't just hide anymore. They spent the next hours fortifying the warehouse as best as they could, using old furniture and crates to block entrances, creating a semblance of security. Daniel checked their supplies, a first aid kit, a small flashlight, some bottled water. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy them time. As the day wore on, the tension eased slightly. The quiet moments allowed them to talk again, in whispers, about life before the storm, about dreams and regrets, about the lessons they had learned from small acts of kindness. Emma shared a story about helping a runaway teenager find shelter, about how empathy sometimes required patience more than immediate action. Daniel reflected on his daughter, on the importance of showing love and care, even when life seemed impossible. They laughed softly at little memories, coffee breaks, inside jokes, a prank that had gone wrong, and for a brief moment, the world felt almost normal. Daniel realized that even in chaos, even when danger was imminent, human connection could be a lifeline. Their bond, though fraught with mistakes and secrets, had moments of light that reminded them both why kindness and empathy mattered. But that fragile calm didn't last. As dusk fell, a new sound reached their ears, the distant roar of an engine, growing louder and faster, echoing through the empty streets outside. Daniel's stomach churned. Someone was coming, and they weren't coming to talk. The warehouse walls shook slightly as the engine approached, and Daniel rushed to the door, peering into the gloom. A large black SUV came barreling down the street, tires skidding on the wet pavement. The headlights cut through the dim, illuminating the building. Daniel realized with horror that the intruder from earlier was not alone. Before he could react further, the SUV slammed into the side of the warehouse with a deafening crash, sending splinters flying and shaking the floor beneath them. Daniel grabbed Emma, shielding her from the debris, his ears ringing from the impact. The vehicle skidded to a stop, engine still roaring, and Daniel could see multiple figures stepping out, their faces obscured, their intentions clear. His mind raced. This wasn't just a random attack anymore. This was organized, targeted. And then, one of them raised a weapon, pointing it directly at the doorway where Daniel had been standing. The chapter ended with Daniel realizing that they were completely surrounded, and whatever came next could determine not only their fate but the survival of their secret, the affair that had sparked this chain of events. Daniel's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. The black SUV sat crooked against the side of the warehouse, smoke curling from the front bumper. Its engine growled like a predator, low and menacing, while the four figures stepping out moved with purpose, their steps synchronized and deliberate. "Stay down," Daniel whispered to Emma, pressing her against the floor as shards of wood and dust rained around them. He tried to think, any plan forming in his mind, but fear clouded his thoughts. He had faced dangerous situations before, high-speed chases, armed robberies, even violent criminals, but nothing like this. This was personal. One of the figures kicked open the warehouse door fully, and Daniel could see a glimpse of the leader, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with an eerie calm. The glint of a gun in their hand caught the fading light. His stomach sank. This wasn't about random intimidation. Someone had tracked them down with precision. "Emma," he said softly, gripping her hand, "no matter what happens, we stay together. We protect each other." She nodded, eyes wide but resolute, her trust in him unwavering. Daniel felt a brief flash of guilt. That trust had been built on lies, on secrecy, on a hidden affair he had tried to keep buried. And now those very lies had placed them in mortal danger. The intruders began sweeping through the warehouse methodically, kicking over crates and checking corners. Daniel and Emma remained silent, barely breathing, listening to the harsh scrape of boots across concrete. Every second felt like an eternity. Daniel tried to recall everything he knew about the warehouse layout, the small side exit near the loading dock, the narrow ventilation shaft, even the back windows that were cracked from years of neglect. Anything could be a way out. For a tense half-hour, they held their positions, waiting, the only sounds the occasional muttered word from the intruders and the distant patter of rain against the broken windows. Daniel realized that adrenaline had taken over his mind, pushing fear aside enough to think clearly. He had to protect Emma, but he also had to think about survival. Eventually, the intruders seemed to pause, regrouping near the entrance. Daniel saw his chance. He whispered to Emma, "On my signal, we run for the back exit. Do not hesitate." She nodded again, courage braver than he felt. The moment came. Daniel pushed Emma toward the shadows near the loading dock. The intruders didn't notice immediately. They were distracted by something behind them, possibly one of the fallen crates. Daniel's heart leapt. They were almost free. But then came the sound of a gun cocking. One of the intruders had noticed the movement. "Stop!" a voice shouted. Daniel froze. Emma pressed against him. Bullets rang out, ricocheting off metal and wood, sending sparks and splinters flying. Daniel dove to the floor, pulling Emma down with him. Pain lanced through his shoulder as a stray bullet grazed his coat, narrowly missing him. They pressed themselves against the ground, hearts hammering, breaths shallow. For what felt like hours, they remained in that position, the warehouse a deadly maze of shadows, noise, and fear. Eventually, the sound of movement outside suggested the intruders had shifted focus, giving them a small window. Daniel risked a glance. The back exit was clear, for now. They bolted, adrenaline carrying them through the dripping rain, the cold water soaking them immediately. Daniel held Emma's hand tightly as they ran down a side alley, each footstep careful but urgent. The sound of the SUV engine resumed behind them, tires squealing on wet pavement. Their pursuers were relentless. After what felt like miles, Daniel led them to a small, abandoned apartment building on the outskirts of town. The door creaked as he pushed it open, and they slipped inside, hearts still racing. Inside, the space smelled of damp carpet and old wood. Daniel closed the door and bolted it as best he could. For the first time that day, they were safe, at least temporarily. Hours passed as they caught their breath. Daniel examined Emma's injuries more carefully, bruises, cuts, and a small gash on her forehead that needed cleaning. He used what he could from a small first aid kit, his hands trembling slightly from exhaustion and fear. Emma winced, but she didn't complain. "You've saved my life," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Even after everything." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't save you. We survived together. That's what matters." They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the soft patter of rain outside. Daniel thought about his life, the choices, the secrets, the lies that had brought them here. He realized that even in moments of extreme fear, empathy and human connection had guided him. The small acts of kindness, the trust between him and Emma, were what had kept them alive this far. As night deepened, Daniel and Emma finally allowed themselves to talk more freely, though cautiously. They shared stories from their childhoods, memories of family holidays, small moments of laughter that reminded them of who they were beyond uniforms and danger. For a brief moment, the chaos faded, but that fragile calm shattered when a sudden sound from the floor above made Daniel freeze. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and approaching. Daniel's blood ran cold. "They found us," he whispered. Emma clutched his arm. "We can't let them get us. Not now. Not ever." The footsteps grew louder. Daniel reached for anything that could serve as a weapon, a broken chair leg, a metal pipe, anything, while trying to keep Emma behind him. The shadow of a figure appeared at the top of the stairs, and then another figure joined them. And another. Daniel's mind raced. They were surrounded once more, trapped in a building with multiple intruders who seemed to know every move they would make. The night was no longer about running. It was about survival, about fighting to protect each other, and about the impossible choice between confronting the danger or hiding and risking being discovered. Daniel froze, his muscles locked in terror as the intruder's gun trained on Emma. The metal felt cold even from a distance, and the calm in the intruder's voice made Daniel's blood run cold. He had seen this before, in training, in reports, in movies, but nothing prepared him for it in real life, with someone he cared about inches away from danger. Emma's eyes were wide, but they didn't scream fear. They were steady, almost defiant. Daniel felt a surge of pride mingled with desperation. He couldn't lose her. Not now. Not like this. "Wait," Daniel said slowly, trying to buy time. His voice was low, even, controlled. "You don't have to do this. We can talk. Just put the gun down." The intruder tilted their head slightly, as if weighing the words, and Daniel realized that whoever these people were, they were organized, precise, and terrifyingly patient. The other intruders moved methodically around the room, herding them subtly toward the center, cutting off potential escape routes. Daniel's mind raced. The warehouse had been bad. The run through the rain had been worse. But now they were trapped, indoors, with no clear way out. Every plan he had formed evaporated in the face of this new reality. He scanned the room for anything at all, that could give them an advantage. Emma spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Danny, we can do this. Together. Just stay calm." He nodded, grateful for her courage. Her trust in him gave him focus, even in the chaos. Daniel's eyes settled on a fire extinguisher mounted near the wall. It was heavy, but it could serve as a weapon, or at least a distraction. "Emma, when I say go, you run to the back door." "I'll hold them off," he murmured. Her hand squeezed his, steadying both of them. "Okay. I trust you." The moment came. Daniel lunged toward the extinguisher and yanked it from the wall. He aimed it at the intruder with the gun, spraying the white chemical in their direction. The intruder stumbled back, coughing and blinking, momentarily blinded. "Now!" Daniel shouted. He grabbed Emma's hand, and they bolted for the back exit. The other intruders scrambled, but Daniel used his strength and agility to knock over a table, blocking one of them. They burst into the stairwell, the cold air hitting them like a wall. Daniel could hear shouting behind them, the chaos of pursuit echoing through the building. They sprinted down the narrow stairs, taking them two at a time, Daniel's shoulder still aching from the previous night's injuries. Finally, they reached the ground floor, and Daniel pushed open a side door that led to the alley. Rain poured down, soaking them immediately. They ran, slipping and sliding, until the sounds of pursuit faded. For a brief moment, they dared to breathe, to feel the raw relief of survival. They ducked into an old storage garage nearby, collapsing against the wall. Daniel's chest heaved, Emma leaning against him for support. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by exhaustion and a gnawing fear of what was still coming. "You okay?" Daniel asked, brushing wet hair from her face. "I will be," she said quietly. We need to think. They'll come back. They always do." Daniel nodded. She was right. They had survived the night, but the threat wasn't over. Whoever these people were, they weren't going to stop until they had what they wanted, which was more than just control over them. It was punishment, exposure, a reckoning for the affair that Daniel had tried to hide. Hours passed as they planned their next moves. They scouted the surrounding streets, found a safe place to rest, and tried to formulate a strategy. Daniel realized that survival required not just courage, but empathy, understanding the motivations of their attackers, predicting their moves, and staying one step ahead. In those quieter hours, Daniel reflected on the lessons he had learned in life. Helping others, being honest when it mattered, showing kindness, these weren't just abstract ideals. They were lifelines, the moral compass that kept him grounded even when chaos consumed everything else. He shared some of these thoughts with Emma, who listened silently, eyes shining with trust and warmth. They fell asleep for a few hours, huddled together in the back corner of the garage, only to be awakened by a distant, chilling sound, the unmistakable wail of a siren approaching fast. Daniel froze. "That's not for us," he whispered. But as the sound grew closer, a sinking feeling gripped his chest. The siren was not random. Someone had called the police, but was it a friend or another trap set by the people hunting them? They peeked cautiously from the shadows. A police cruiser pulled up outside the garage, its lights flashing in the rain. Relief and suspicion warred within Daniel. Maybe it was help. Maybe it was a setup. Then the extreme event hit. A shadowy figure darted from the darkness and leapt onto the hood of the police cruiser, smashing the windshield. Glass shattered everywhere. Daniel and Emma screamed, ducking instinctively as chaos erupted once again around them. The attackers had followed them, and now the police, whether aware or not, were caught in the crossfire. Daniel knew in that instant that their lives had become a dangerous chess game, with no safe squares, no pause, and every move watched. Emma clung to him, trembling, and Daniel realized that the only way forward was to confront the threat head-on. But who would survive, and who would be left to face the consequences of their choice? The shattered windshield glittered like broken ice under the flashing lights of the police cruiser. Daniel and Emma pressed themselves to the wet pavement, rain mixing with the shards of glass around them. The air was thick with tension, sirens blaring, and the scent of rain-soaked asphalt mingling with adrenaline. The shadowy figure atop the cruiser swung down with a speed that defied expectation. Daniel's instincts kicked in. He grabbed Emma, pulling her back as the figure landed hard on the street. Concrete scraped against skin, but Daniel barely felt it. All he could think about was keeping Emma safe. The police officers jumped out, weapons drawn, shouting commands that collided with the screams of chaos, but the attackers moved with deadly precision. Bullets ricocheted off metal, tires screeched on wet pavement, and the figure that had leapt on the cruiser disappeared into the shadows almost as quickly as they had arrived. Daniel held Emma close, keeping her low. "We have to move. Now," he said, his voice low but urgent. They sprinted toward a nearby alley, slipping through puddles and debris, hearts hammering in unison. The sounds of chaos followed them, echoing off brick walls, but somehow the alley provided a brief, almost surreal, silence. For a few minutes, they let themselves breathe. Daniel's mind raced through every possible angle, where the attackers could be hiding, how they knew their movements, what their ultimate goal was. Each reflection was laced with guilt. His secrets, his hidden choices, had drawn this danger to them. Emma deserved none of this, and yet here she was, trusting him completely. Emma broke the silence. "Danny, even after all this, I still believe in the good in people. Even them." Daniel shook his head. "You're braver than I am sometimes. They've done terrible things, but you still see empathy where I can't." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that survival wasn't just about running or fighting. It was about seeing the humanity in others, even in moments of terror, and holding on to that in the face of darkness. It was that small spark, trust, compassion, kindness, that had kept them alive so far. They reached the end of the alley, a quiet street lined with abandoned buildings. Daniel scanned the horizon. No sign of the attackers yet, but he knew the calm was temporary. Whoever was after them would not relent. Hours passed. They found a safe apartment, small, cramped, but hidden, and barricaded the doors. They cleaned up what they could from minor cuts and bruises, sharing a quiet dinner of canned soup and stale bread. The night stretched long, filled with whispered conversations and careful planning. Daniel and Emma spoke about their childhoods, about lessons learned from parents and teachers, about moments of kindness that shaped who they were. The simple memories, a neighbor lending a hand, a teacher who noticed when someone was struggling, reminded them both that even in darkness, light existed. These quiet moments helped them regain strength, if only temporarily. But just as Daniel allowed himself a breath, a soft sound cut through the silence, a faint tapping at the window. He froze. Emma's eyes widened. "Who's there?" Daniel called, trying to keep his voice calm, even though every nerve screamed in warning. No answer, only the sound of rain dripping from the roof. Daniel approached the window slowly, every step measured, his mind imagining every worst-case scenario. He peered through the glass. At first, nothing. Then, a shadow moved, a single figure standing motionless in the darkness across the street. Daniel's blood ran cold. They weren't safe, not even in hiding. Whoever was hunting them had eyes everywhere. And this time, they were closer than ever. He grabbed Emma's hand. "We need to go. Now. There's no time to wait." As they prepared to leave, a new sound erupted behind them, the unmistakable roar of engines. Multiple vehicles, circling, surrounding the building. The intruders had coordinated a trap. Daniel realized with horror that every exit would soon be cut off. Before he could react further, a window on the far side of the apartment shattered. Glass exploded inward, and one of the attackers appeared, silhouetted against the stormy night. Daniel instinctively pushed Emma out of the way as the figure leapt in, landing heavily, weapon raised. Emma screamed. Daniel's heart raced. Every lesson about courage, empathy, and survival would be tested in the next moments. The flash of the gunshot left Daniel momentarily blinded. Emma's scream pierced the storm outside, and for a second, time froze. Heart hammering, Daniel lunged toward the figure that had broken in, tackling them to the floor. The attacker grunted, their weapon skidding across the wet wooden floor, while Daniel pressed down with every ounce of strength he had left. Emma scrambled back, tears streaming, but Daniel grabbed her hand. "Stay down!" he shouted, his voice sharp with panic and focus. "We can't let them get us." The intruders struggled violently, and Daniel's arms ached as he fought to subdue them. Every second felt like an eternity. In the chaos, Daniel realized just how fragile life could be, how quickly trust, love, and safety could unravel. And he knew he would do anything, everything, to protect Emma. Finally, after a brutal struggle, Daniel pinned the intruder to the ground. They gasped, their face twisted in fury. Daniel recognized a glimpse of anger and desperation that mirrored his own, the same kind of dark choices that could lead a person to ruin. In that moment, he understood the story of the attackers, someone consumed by secrets, lies, and betrayal, just like he had been. Emma, trembling, reached down and helped Daniel hold the intruder still. "We can't just hurt them," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "We have to survive, not become what they are." Daniel nodded. She was right. Survival wasn't just about brute force. It was about courage, empathy, and choosing humanity even in the darkest moments. The sounds of rain and sirens outside grew louder. Daniel realized they couldn't stay inside much longer. He and Emma dragged the intruder toward the small back exit, moving carefully through the storm. Outside, the street was slick, the night chaotic, but it offered them a chance, maybe the only chance, to end this nightmare. Suddenly, headlights cut across the street. Multiple SUVs screeched to a halt, surrounding them. Daniel froze. More attackers. They had been outmaneuvered. But then came another sound, the distant wail of police sirens, closer this time, cutting through the rain-soaked darkness. Daniel took a deep breath. "Emma, stay close to me. We have one last move." He and Emma sprinted toward a narrow alley between buildings, the pinned intruder struggling but unable to break free. Rain soaked them to the bone, wind whipped against their faces, and every step felt like a battle against fate itself. From the shadows, another figure appeared, taller, colder, with a gun aimed directly at Daniel. He stopped, heart in his throat, knowing the wrong move could end everything. The storm and the chaos seemed to pause, as if the universe was holding its breath. Emma whispered, "Danny, trust me." With a sudden surge of clarity, Daniel reacted. He pushed Emma behind him, tackled the attacker to the ground, and rolled toward the nearest exit, dragging the struggling intruder along. A gunshot rang out, missing him by inches. The storm seemed to roar louder, drowning out all other sound. Then, in an almost miraculous turn, the distant police vehicles arrived. Flashing lights illuminated the alley, and officers swarmed, weapons raised. The attackers froze, realizing their numbers were no match for trained law enforcement. Daniel and Emma collapsed against the wall, soaked, exhausted, and trembling, while officers restrained the intruders. For the first time in days, Daniel allowed himself to breathe. Relief mingled with guilt, regret, and a lingering fear that this nightmare wasn't fully over. As the police led the captured attackers away, Daniel turned to Emma. "We made it," he said, his voice hoarse but relieved. Emma smiled weakly, brushing wet hair from her face. "Yes, together." In the quiet aftermath, Daniel reflected on the journey, the lies that had started it, the chaos that had almost destroyed them, and the small moments of kindness and trust that had kept them alive. He realized that survival was not just about fighting the darkness around you, but about protecting the humanity within yourself and others. Days later, Daniel and Emma gave their statements to the authorities, finally free from the immediate threat. They returned to their lives, marked by trauma but strengthened by the ordeal. They knew that danger could strike again, but they also knew that empathy, courage, and trust were stronger than fear. And as they stood together, watching the sunrise over the city, Daniel whispered, "No matter what happens next, we face it together." Emma squeezed his hand. "Always." The storm had passed. The danger was behind them. And for the first time, they allowed themselves to hope, not blind hope, but the kind earned through courage, compassion, and survival. Even in a world shadowed by secrets and betrayal, Daniel and Emma had learned the ultimate lesson, that the human heart, when guided by kindness and empathy, could endure even the darkest nights. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories.